I am here with Melanie McLemore, and I am so grateful that you've taken time to talk with me. I know your daughter Addie has been with Handprints for 2 years, and we've caught up quite a bit about your story, and I'm just really excited for you to share your experience, not only from the time that you received a diagnosis for your daughter, but also your journey from there, like the process and how to navigate our super complicated system, and how to determine if ABA is right for Addie, and how to choose a program that works well for her. So thank you for being here.
Of course.
And let's start with Addie. So tell me about Addie. And
Addie's a firecracker. Like we talk about, she's like a Sour Patch Kid. She's like sweet some days, and then she has a little sass, but in a good way. She loves arts and crafts. She loves singing. She loves dancing. She just loves to cuddle. She's just the sweetest and has a heart of gold.
I know that. I've seen her. She is a superstar, and she is quite a member of our team downstairs. So when Addie was a baby, you had shared earlier on maybe some red flags that you noticed right around, especially around the age of 1. Is that right?
Yes. So basically before hitting the age 1, she was meeting all her milestones, saying mama, saying dada. But then once she hit a year old, she just regressed, just quit talking, quit just hitting those milestones that she should have. Just other little things we kind of noticed before she turned a year old was like nursing. I struggled with that, and she struggled with like just wanting to like face you, and to do that, I always had to sit her on my lap facing out, like holding the bottle like this, because that was the only way she would do that. And then she was always stiff as well. So even my mom would visit from South Dakota and would make comments like, oh, she's stiff, like she won't just relax. So we noticed little things like that, that as a new mom, I didn't know if it was different or off. Until we started noticing about a year old, then my husband's parents started making comments that she shows some characteristics of her dad, who also has had being on the spectrum as well. He never fully got tested, so it's never like officially confirmed, but there's definitely those
some similarities.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So that's kind of what triggered me to be like, okay, I should look more into this, because I want to be able to help my daughter early on and have her succeed and be able to get this taken care of at a young age, and not wait till later on when we're already having issues or anything like that. With her, I mean, it's just crazy, because even her grandpa on her dad's side would make comments about like, she would just like look at something and know like mechanically what to do, like be like, oh, here, you know, or like be very intrigued by watching him do things, whether it's in the shop or building stuff or putting things together. She just would be so into it. And it's just crazy. And even my husband's a locksmith, she would like see that and be like, oh, that's for keys, or that's for this, and it's like, okay.
So some real strong splinter skills, so to speak.
Exactly.
Interesting. So she's got some really strong suits in a lot of areas.
And then we started noticing like throughout that first year a little bit just the lack of communication. And then she would get super overwhelmed when she couldn't say what she wanted. Like I remember having videos of her when she's a baby and she's like flapping her arms and she's panicking because she's trying to like tell me what she wants to do, but she's not communicating it with me. And she would get overwhelmed, and it would just lead into a full meltdown, which is hard, because it's like, is it just her being a kid, or is it her having like being overwhelmed? What it is. But it's just sad looking back on videos now or seeing those things now.
Well, it's interesting you said earlier on that you were very in tune with some of maybe the red flags that you were seeing. And Addie's your first and only child, right?
Correct.
So it's tricky, because I think a lot of families don't know, is this within the normal range, or is this something to be aware of? So I remember you said that you had brought this to the attention of your physician, right? Your pediatrician.
Correct.
And what was your experience with that?
I remember walking back there and then just watching the evaluation. Like the evaluation itself went fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like just watching it from like the outside looking in and seeing how she reacted to things when I'm not actively playing with her was
Mm-hmm.
crazy to see.
Interesting.
Like there was like this little toy dog that if you press a button it like barks and all that stuff, and it had like the little like leash, and that's where the battery pack was to make it bark.
Yeah.
And instead of like her being like, oh, pet the dog or do that, like her automatic thing was to turn the dog upside down and see where the mechanical thing worked, and she would like look up to where the battery pack is and kind of look back down at it and just kind of fidget with it. And it's
Sure.
like, okay, you know, or there was like this little toy bathtub for the dolls. Same thing, not really playing with the doll as intended, more like seeing how the bathtub worked and like putting it together.
The mechanics of
Exactly.
it.
And so it's just like crazy seeing it from that aspect of it, because when you're actively down playing with her, I didn't really.
You lose sight of.
Exactly. Well, we did get a diagnosis from them, like ASD level 2, but just at that point, just still did not feel good having her go there.
Right.
And then that's when I just did my research. I don't live very far from here, and then I found here, so I talked to Alexis, and then she had me come in, and right away, like just coming in, just the atmosphere is a lot different.
How so?
Just,
What
like,
did you sense?
I mean, just walking in, and first off, not feeling like it's robotic. Like kids were allowed to be kids, you know, and I really like that for her, because I don't want it to be where she's robotic or very like strict on every single thing. Like I want her to be a kid, but just know how to adapt.
This is a really important question that a lot of our
Yeah.
families have. When their child receives a diagnosis of ASD, how to find a space that is right for their child.
Yes.
And I love what you said about being open to visiting different places and trusting your gut.
Yes.
And looking at, like you said, more of a playful, involved atmosphere. And I think that's an important piece that to let families know, to be open to asking questions and touring as many places as they feel.
I mean, some places may be better for other parents than others, or other kids. I mean, maybe more like the strict atmosphere is good for some kids, but for my daughter specifically, she's too hyperactive for that, and too, like, has too much of a personality, like in a good way. But just seeing the other thing too is like, it's not like I see the RBTs or BCBAs just stand there with their notepad watching the kid. Like they're actually down playing with the kid. They're down like drawing hopscotch. They're down like doing bubbles with, like they're actively with the child, to the point where my child is like, oh, that's my friend. That's my friend. And that's what I love about it. Fantastic. And then she doesn't want to come home half the time because of it.
You did mention that sometimes it's really exciting to come to Handprints, and then kind of tricky to leave, because she does enjoy it so much. I'm so glad.
Yes.
You mentioned that at the time of maybe 18 months, you had a gut feeling that there may be some red flags, and just not knowing, you don't have another child to base that off of, and I think many of our families aren't sure at that time, so bringing that to the attention of your pediatrician was a great idea, and it seems like you brought it to the attention repetitive times.
I think it's just putting it in your mindset, like no one knows your child better than you do as a parent. You're the one that's with your child every day. You're the one who knows their characteristics. You're the one who knows just how they are. And that's where that gut instinct comes in. Like just something it seems a little off, you know, like, especially if you compare, I mean, I know you shouldn't compare things to movies, or you shouldn't compare things to that, but it's like how you see kids play at the park, or how you see that. It's like, Addie would always kind of be in her own little world, or just kind of like by herself playing, or like when she's with her cousins, like she'll play with them, but sometimes they're the ones like running around or playing, and she's the one that's kind of off to the side, like putting something together, or like just kind of standing off from it.
So trusting your gut, and really advocating for your child, talking with your pediatrician, getting another opinion, asking for a diagnostician if you have that gut feeling. Thank you. I think that's important for families to hear. So I would love for you to talk about determining if ABA is right for your child.
So I feel like with ABA, I mean, I'm a big research person. So I did a lot of research on whether ABA was just good in general or not because I wasn't familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just am big, I want best for my child. I'm going to do research of all these different options. But with ABA, I feel like you hear like negative and positive based off different people's opinions or different people's like experience with it, basically. So kind of like, for instance, if I had her at that other clinic, maybe I wouldn't have gotten the greatest experience. But then here, I feel like it just was the right fit for her. And when it comes to ABA, like how I had to put myself in a perspective of why it was best for my daughter, especially at the young age she was, is I know like autism wasn't really a thing when I was younger. So it's like looking back, seeing some of these like kids like in my own school and stuff who were the troublemakers or the, you know, because it wasn't really known about. But with Addie, I was like, I don't want it to get to the point where we're having issues before being like, oh, we need to do something about it. Or like wait till she's like going through like middle school or like just your changes your mind and body go through in general growing up. So with ABA, it's teaching her how to adapt to that, to life. You know, it's not teaching her that she's different. It's not teaching her that she's like not like the other kids. Like it's teaching her just to adapt. So if she's overwhelmed, hey, let's do it this way. Let's step away for a moment, you know, and I feel like it's teaching a positive aspect of how to handle life situations in general, which will help her succeed. And that's kind of how I feel about it. I don't feel like it's anything that affects her in a negative way. I don't feel like it's anything that she's going to have to constantly be on a strict thing for the rest of her life. You know, it's just teaching her to adapt to life. And that's important.
Well, and you said something really important. You did the research. Is ABA right for my child? You also said earlier that there are different approaches to ABA and to really do that research to find the program that meets your child's needs. So nicely done on doing that research. That's a big one.
Because I know we were in contact for a little while during that and then just trying to figure that out too. So
another thing I wanted to ask you about as you were doing research for ABA programs, did you notice that some programs included OT, speech and physical therapy, and then others did not?
Yes. So it was actually amazing, like timing wise, because at the other place it was just ABA. They didn't really offer like OT, speech, or physical therapy at all. But we knew Addie would kind of need a little bit of everything. But when we came here, it was like when you just started offering those things. So it was perfect because it was nice having everything under the same roof. And it's nice to like know who everyone is. I'm not driving to Denver for this. I'm not driving to Wheat Ridge for this. I'm not driving, you know, it's nice having it all in-house where people know her and know her on different levels in that aspect. And then with what she was learning in speech therapy or occupational therapy or physical therapy, like they were utilizing that in her ABA. And it was nice to be able to have that all connected.
That collaborative, interdisciplinary
and all that
approach.
communication too.
Well, and I do think that there's feedback from families that it feels like it may be disjointed, that they're getting some recommendations from OT outside of ABA that contradict what the ABA team is saying. So that is something that we pride ourselves on, that we're using a similar language, similar approach, that interdisciplinary approach.
And I actually went and watched one of the speech therapies happen just to kind of see how she was going about it. And I remember just like how amazing, like same thing with the RBTs here, like they were on the ground, they were playing with her, they were showing her like not be like, I need you to say this, I need you to say that. They were like teaching it in like everyday play or everyday like just scenarios, and the RBT would be in there with her. So it's nice because the RBT learns in that way too. So like, oh, okay, I'll utilize that when we're in here, or like with feeding or with any of that. It just was amazing having that communication and having everyone be on the same page.
Fantastic. That carryover from the speech to TOT. You mentioned something really important, that you came in and observed, and you are very much a part of the program. And I think that's an important thing for families to hear, that get involved, go observe, see what's happening, and continue to reassess, is this a good fit? So
and I mean anything, even when my daughter was in PT, when they were doing the brush technique, like they're like, hey, why don't you come in like before you leave for the day with Addie, and just come in and I'll show you how to do it. And like just very interactive with parents, very communicating, like they communicate with us too, which is a big thing.
Fantastic. I would love to talk about some of the challenges and knowing that it's different for every family. Wondering if you can share a little bit about the diagnosis and the grieving process and just how that felt for you and your family.
So even though I had the gut feeling the whole time, nothing prepares you for when you actually get the diagnosis. So I feel like that was very tough on me. It was very hard because it made it a reality. And I remember like even leaving from getting the diagnosis, or even seeing like how she was playing with different things like during the evaluation, and just like leaving crying. But it's like, it's almost bittersweet almost, because it's like, okay, I finally have an answer. But it's hard because it's like you don't know what to expect for her life because it's so new. So it's like, and obviously like I have friends with kids who have autism. I've seen videos, I've seen movies, I've seen, you know, and you see some scary stuff sometimes, and it worries you because it's like you don't want to ever see your child in pain. You don't ever want to see your child go through like being overwhelmed or some of these issues that you hear about. So that was the biggest fear I had, because I never want my child to like be looked down on or be like treated differently because of it, or have her, if we do run into issues in the future, like as our minds and bodies change. And it's very tough. It's very tough. And I know we just utilize the resources we have, and there's not going to be easy days all the time. Like there's so many days where like she is the sweetest kid in the world, and then 2 days later the same exact thing that just made her happy and excited she did not like, and she would hit, she would cry, she would just have like tantrums. And it was more than just like your typical kid tantrums. It was like where you can tell she's struggling, and it's hard to see that as a parent because you want nothing more than to be able to help your child. So it's just it does have good and bad days, and then you just have to push through it and take it one day at a time and realize like what's bad now is not going to be bad tomorrow, or you know. And it's like we have to take each like bump in the road as it comes.
I think so many caregivers will resonate with what you just said, and sharing that initial sense of grief with the diagnosis. And any recommendations for soon after a family gets that diagnosis? We know that it's going to be different time periods for each family. I wonder if you can give some.
I mean, I think just allowing yourself to cope and allowing yourself to grieve. And that's a big thing. I mean, I am a strong believer that it's okay to not be okay. Like, and I think surrounding yourself with like a good environment and just like taking it one day at a time, like coming here, I know this was the next step, and I knew she was going to be taken care of here, and that made me feel good as a mom. But it's exactly that. It's just trusting your gut, like getting the help your child needs and doing what's best for your child, just like what any parent would want. And I think just one day at a time, breathing through it and taking care of yourself as a parent. Because that, I think, is where a lot of people miss, because we're so focused on, and I'm guilty of it too, where you're so focused making sure your child's okay that you kind of lose yourself in the process, and then it kind of all hits you at once, or then you kind of get to the point where you wear yourself out. So it's just, even if it means like being outside and taking a walk or doing a fun hobby that you like to do, I mean, you have to take care of yourself as a parent, because if you're not your best parent or your best self, you're not your best parent for your kid.
So taking that time, taking care of yourself, and when you're ready to do the research.
Yes.
And to include with that research touring and working with other organizations to see what is the right place for your child.
Exactly.
Excellent. What about some success stories?
Oh man, I think one of the biggest things that I get a lot of compliments on is like her speech, because she went from not talking. And I'm not saying this is the same with every kid, because every kid has their own struggles. Every kid has their own like needs, or like their own lessons, or anything that they need to be taught or learned. But with my daughter, she graduated, I think, within 8 months of speech. And we went to do child find for Jefferson County Schools to do her evaluation and all that for the IEP program. And what's crazy is we did it, and they were like, she actually is on the top level for her vocabulary and speech for her age. Like, she's like at the top there. And it's like, okay, so we went from not talking at 2 years old to her being 4 and exceeding like other kids her age.
Fantastic.
And like the other thing we noticed too is like she does have hyperactive like characteristics, like we all know, but they didn't even put her in as IEP for autistic because she excelled so much here and just had so much help here and learned how to adapt so fast to everything. And anything I had concerns on, or I was like, hey, she's really starting to get aggressive, she's really starting to have issues, I just communicate that with her RBTs or her BCBA, and it's just like crazy. They just work on it right away. It's not like, oh, we'll put that on the list to work on. It's like they will be like, okay, let's change her lesson. We're going to start that right now. And I feel like it adapts her better because we're taking care of it right away. So I feel like that's where the success is the IEP not even putting down that she's autistic, because a lot of those characteristics that they see in that, or like kids who haven't had help before or had help with ABA, it's like she didn't have those issues.
Fantastic. Let's talk about transition plan. So with ABA programs, that is an important thing to ask as families are doing research on what is a good fit for them, to ask about their transition plan. So can you share Addie's transition plan?
So her transition plan right now is she's going to be starting pre-K this fall. We were originally going to start her off last year with pre-K, but just gut instinct, I was like, not quite yet, not quite yet. She needs another year being here, you know, like I want her to be at her full potential. And then, which I'm thankful for. But so our plan is she would go to Montessori Peaks Academy. She would be there for half day in the mornings, and then we would bring her here for the afternoon. And so that way it's not like, oh, we're just going to go put her in school now and let her adjust. It's so we can gradually get her to adjust to a school life. So I believe the half day thing is amazing, because if she's having a hard day at school that day, well, then she's coming to ABA right after and just kind of like coping with it, or like learning to adjust to that slowly. And it's going to be a big change for her, you know, and it's just a matter of like getting her excited for these things. Like we went and toured the school and we're like, see, isn't this so cool? They had this cool playground. Oh, look at this arts and crafts they did, you know, and she gets so excited about it. And it's like, just knowing I have both her here and her school, like working hand in hand, where I'm going to be able to do both that first year, is amazing.
Did you feel like you got a really good support as you were searching for transitional program options, half-day programs?
I mean, honestly, originally, like, my plan was to do half and half either way. Because just my own thought is I don't want to overwhelm her. And then with, I think it was like Alexis I talked to, like she was all for it. She's like, that's awesome, we'll make it work. And even like though like your half days start at certain times, you guys were willing to work with me, where it's like, okay, but she gets out of school at this, I have to be back to work because I'm using my lunch hour to drop her off from one place to another. They were like, oh yeah, we'll take her at that time. Like no hesitation, like very accommodating, which helps with this transition.
It seems like a really good plan to do that transitional half day here, half day at school. And I think that would be a really important question for families to ask as they interview ABA programs, to see if that's an option. Because that does feel like a great next step, where it's not a whole 100% transition to
well, and it makes me sad to think like after this next year, like her not coming here anymore, like when she graduates here, it makes me sad. And I actually talked to another mom here whose son just graduated out of here as well, and she's like, I miss it. She's like, I love that place. I wish my son was still able to go there, you know. And it's just like, it breaks my heart to think of having to graduate out of here, because it's done so much for my daughter. And that's why I'm such an advocate. Like I'm always talking about this place. Like if customers talk about my work lanyard because it says autism awareness, they're like, oh, who's that? And I say my daughter, and then they're like, oh, okay. And then I talk about Handprints and how amazing it is. And when she starts school, I know it's going to be the same thing. Like I'll constantly talk about it.
It's interesting, from the time we meet a new kiddo here, our goal is always to get to that graduation. And it's so bittersweet for us too,
Yeah.
because we've seen the growth and the progress, and then they put their cap and gown on,
Yes.
and they graduate,
Yes.
and it is bittersweet, and it's beautiful, and that's our goal.
It is. It's beautiful. It's very beautiful because it means like it's the end of one chapter and going on to the next. And it's like, and I'm getting emotional now because it's like it is a big part because it is hard. You know, like I want to see her excel. I want to see her do the best for her, but it's like Handprints will always have a special place in her heart and my heart because it's always been amazing.
Well, Addie will always have a special place in our heart here. It has been such a pleasure having you and Addie, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Yes, definitely. I was like, I'm not
This
gonna
is
cry.
what
I'm not gonna
happens
cry. I'm not gonna cry.